Good morning and welcome to the first lecture of this intensive Latin course. Today we're going to talk about Latin pronunciation. It is unclear how Romans pronounced their language. What is certain is that during its millennial history, Latin underwent several and substantial modifications, and it evolved through centuries, so the pronunciation was not always the same. We have a certain kind of evidence which help us reconstruct how Latin pronounced their language. First of all, we have the works of the grammarians, which tell us how certain words were pronounced. Then we have inscriptions, which tell us the spelling of certain words. And then there is, for example, transliteration of certain terms from Latin to other languages, which tell us how certain letter might have sounded like. Today, there are two types of pronunciation which are taught in modern schools. The first one is the church or ecclesiastical pronunciation. This is a pronunciation which is very similar to how Latin was pronounced in the medieval age. And it is called the church pronunciation because it was standardized by the Christian church in Europe. This pronunciation is taught in not many schools in Europe today. Italy is one of the countries in which church pronunciation is taught. For example, I studied there, so I was raised up with the church pronunciation. The second type of pronunciation is the classical pronunciation, called also pronuntiatio restituta, with a Latin expression, which means restored pronunciation. And linguistic experts really believe that this kind of pronunciation, which is a reconstructed one, was really similar to how original Latin might have sounded like. This is the one that we're going to learn in this course, because this is the pronunciation which is taught in most European schools and all over the United States. So let's start and see what the basic rules of this pronunciation are. So today we're going to talk about Latin pronunciation, in particular the classical pronunciation. Let's start from the consonants. So the alphabet is pretty much similar to English. The only letters that are missing are J and W, which in Latin do not exist. As for the consonants, they are pretty much pronounced like in English. For example, we have the B, which is equal to English. I'm gonna read the letter and then I'm gonna read an example in Latin. Here, as an example, we listed bibere, which means to drink. C is pronounced a little different because it is pronounced like a hard C, like the C of cat. And so the word that in English we pronounce as Caesar, in Latin is pronounced Caesar. D is the same, and so we have the verb dare, which means to give. G is pronounced like a hard G, like the verb to get. And in Latin we have gero, which means to carry. P is the same, so we have pater, which means father in English. Q is pronounced like the verb to quit. And of course you cannot find Q alone, but you find it always followed by a U. We have the verb queror, which means to complain. T is pronounced like in English, and then as a Latin word we have tempus, which means time. All of these consonants are called occlusives. In Latin the verb occludo means to close or to create an obstacle, because all of these sounds are created by an obstacle, which is in your mouth, and then when this obstacle is removed, you have the sound of the letter. Let's take the T, for example. The obstacle here is your tongue, which is put on your teeth. As soon as you remove the tongue from your teeth, you have the sound T. Let's move on. We have other kinds of consonants. For example, F is exactly like English, and so in Latin we have familia, which is the word from which family comes. H it's like the aspiration in English, and so we have the verb habere, which means to have. S is pronounced like serpent, and so in Latin we have sal, which in English means salt. It is pretty much similar. V is not pronounced like in English, but it's pronounced like the W of wet. And so the Latin word will be pronounced vinum, and it means wine. Z is pronounced like a Z, like gadzooks, and the Latin word would be pronounced as zona. All of these consonants are called fricatives because they are produced by a friction with the air coming out of your mouth. Then we have the L, which is like English, and so the Latin word is liber, which means book. The R is a little difficult for English speakers because it is actually rolled. As in Italians, I can roll my R, so I can say rrr. But if you cannot roll your R, it is not a problem. I'm not going to kick you out from the Latin course if you're not capable of rolling your R. It is not a problem for Latin pronunciation. L and R are called liquids. Then we have the M, which is exactly like in English, and so we have mater, which means mother. Same for the N, and then the Latin word for nose will be nasum. These consonants are called nasals because in order to articulate them, you have to expel air from your nose. Then we have other sounds, which are sounds that are originally from Greek, but were later adapted to Latin language. For example, we have CH, which is like a K, so we will have character. In Latin there is this word which means carta, which is a kind of paper. Then we have PH, which can be pronounced either as a P or as an F. TH can be pronounced as the T of tea, but even the TH sound of think is acceptable. But these are sounds that you do not find too often. You find them in Greek words which were transliterated into Latin later. Vowels are a little more complicated. Because in Latin there is an important distinction between the quality and the quantity of a vowel. The quality of a vowel is the property that allows you to distinguish the sound of a vowel from another. This is simple because, for example, if you say pit and pat, you're gonna recognize from the tonality of your voice that the I and the E are different vowels. Therefore, they have a different quality. It is a little harder for the notion of quantity because it's something that we do not have in modern languages. But in ancient languages, we had the length of a vowel, which basically means how long it takes for you to pronounce a vowel. And the concept of the length of a vowel is based on this equation. So, one long vowel equals 2 short vowels. Therefore, a long vowel is pronounced approximately twice as long as a short vowel. I'll give you an example. If you have a short A, you will have to say A. If you have a long A, you will have to pronounce it ah. So the emission of sound has to be longer. So a short vowel is generally not signed, but if it is signed, it will be marked with this little cap on top of the letter. Instead, long vowels are marked with a sign which is called macron, which is, as you can see, this sort of long dash on top of the letter. The consequence is that a long and a short vowel are therefore 2 distinct vowels and can mark the difference between 2 words. I'll give you an example for this. For example, we have these 2 words, allium and allium, which are written the same, but they are pronounced differently, because the first has a short A, and so it must be read allium, which means other. The other one has a long A, as you can see, and it has to be pronounced as allium. In this case, it is clear that the 2 A's have the same quality, but not the same quantity. Therefore, being 2 different vowels, they are going to identify 2 different words. That being said, Latin has 2 sets of 5 vowels. We have the short vowels and the long vowels. I'm going to pronounce first all the shorts and then all the longs. A, E, I, O, U. And then the longs are A, E, I, O, U. as you can hear, they have the same sound, but the long vowels just need to have a longer emission of voice. Then we have another important concept, the concept of diphthongs. A diphthong is a single vocalic sound made from pronouncing two vowels as one. Every language has diphthongs, of course. The word, which is kind of difficult to spell and to pronounce, comes from Greek, from dis, which means twice, plus the verb phthengomai, which means to make a sound. And in Latin we have this set of diphthongs. I'm gonna read them, and I'm gonna read the example in Latin then. So the first one is ae, and the example is rosae, which means roses. Oe, and the example is coepio, which means to begin. Ei, and the example is diei, which means basically day. Then we have ui, and the Latin word which serves as an example is senatui, which is the Senate of Rome. Then we have au, which is found, for example, in the verb aufero, which means to remove. And we have eu, which is kind of rare, and is a combination of I and U. For example, we have the possessive adjective meus, which means my. As a final concept, I would like to talk to you about the stress. In linguistics, there is a distinction between languages with a fixed accent and languages without a fixed accent. French, for instance, is a language with a fixed accent, so the accent in French always falls on the last syllable. There are some exceptions, but the basic rule is this. English, and Italian as well, for example, are languages without a fixed accent. An example in English could be the word rebel, because if you read it as rebel, it means like the person who performs a rebellion. If you read it like rebel, it is the verb, but there is not really a way to predict where the accent goes. You have to know it beforehand. That being said, Latin is a language with a fixed accent. This does not mean that the stress falls always in the same position, but it means that it is very easy to predict which vowel will be stressed. But in order to do that, a word must be first divided into syllables. Syllabification has a chapter in your book. I'm not going to review the rules here because they are just mechanical rules that you can apply automatically, and so you basically just need to memorize them. So I think that this is something you can do on your own. Of course, if you have doubts, just bring them to class. There is a law by means of which you can predict where the stress is gonna be, which is the law of the penult. If the penult syllable, which is the last to one syllable, is long, then it is stressed. If the penult syllable is short, then the stress goes on the previous syllable. And I'll give you a very simple example for that. So let's take, for example, the verb delere, from which delete in English comes. It has three syllables, de-le-re. As you can see, the penult syllable, the vowel of the penult syllable is long, so it means that the accent must fall there. Therefore, you have to read it as delere. Then we have the second word, which is composed by four syllables, kir, cum, da, re. We notice that the penult syllable is short, and so the stress must fall on the previous syllable. Therefore, the word will be read as kircumdare, and not, for example, kircumdare. So it is kircumdare. This is basically all. I hope that everything was clear, and if you have doubts while reading your textbooks, just write them down and bring them to class. For tomorrow, remember to do homework. What I would like you to do is to read the vocabulary of chapter 1. And also what I would like you to do is to take your workbook, open it randomly, and try to read some Latin. It doesn't matter if you don't understand what you're reading, but the important is that you practice reading with exact pronunciation and stress. But be careful, because when you read Latin, if you pronounce it incorrectly, this is what might happen.